Hello everyone, I'm Karthik Selvaraj and welcome to the part 2 of this MQ video tutorial series. So today we will be seeing about what a queue manager is and how to create a queue manager and manage a queue manager object. So I'll go to the next slide. So what is a queue manager? The queue manager is a component which owns and manages the set of resources that are used by an WebSphere MQ. So the resources that included are the MQ objects, which is basically the queues, the channels, and the listeners. And there are a lot of more objects which we'll be seeing in our subsequent classes. And the next one is the logs. So we will also be seeing about how MQ is logging and how to recover the messages in case of failures. I am planning to have it as a separate session. So moving on to the next slide, these are the things that we are going to see. So we'll be creating a queue manager, starting a queue manager, and now stopping a queue manager, and display the different queue managers that are available in that server, and finally we'll be deleting the queue manager. So let me go straight into the machine. So as a part of part 1, we had already installed MQ in this server. So I will be opening the MQ Explorer. So MQ Explorer is a component which is built on Eclipse. So MQ Explorer is used to manage or administrate your MQ components. So you can create components using this GUI tool, or either you can use this GUI tool, or either you can use the command prompt as well. Okay. So I have used strmq cfg to launch this MQ Explorer. Okay, and I have already created a queue manager called world, and you can see there are many objects, queues, topics, subscriptions, channels. So these are the various queue manager objects that I was speaking about. So we'll be seeing in depth in the subsequent videos or what everything does. Okay, so now let's move on to create a queue manager. Okay, so to create a queue manager, either you can, as I told, you can use GUI. Either you can just right click over here and go to new, and you can add a queue manager like this. Give the queue manager name. Suppose for this I can give it as Venus. And there are a lot more configurations, but I don't want to go through each and every thing right now. So I'll be creating it. So you can see there is a new queue manager created by the name Venus over here. Yeah, I can do the same thing using command prompt as well. So the command to create a queue manager is ctr mqm space your queue manager name. Let us name this queue manager as Pluto. Okay, so it gets created, and you can refresh this to see, yes, it is created, but it is stopped, it is not started. Okay, so in order to start your queue manager, you need to have another command, strmqm space the queue manager name, which is Pluto, and this command gets your queue manager start. So you can see it started, and you are able to see all the objects. So while creating queue manager, there is a lot more parameters that you can provide. Suppose if you want to give a description about what this queue manager is about, you can give that as well. For that, you need to have -c, which gives a description about this. You can say this is test QM. Close the quotes, and the queue manager name. Let's name it as Mars. And to view all the queue managers are available in this server, you can use DSP-MQ, which displays all the queue managers which are available. If you see, there are 4 queue managers over here, and it also shows the status of everything. So these 3 queue managers are running, and this is ended immediately. So you can start the queue manager. Mars, it starts, and now if you give DSPMQ, you can see that it is in running mode now. Okay, you can just refresh this as well. Okay, so now we have provided a description for this particular queue manager. So if I go to the properties, it shows me the description as this is a test QM which we provided, and this description can be a maximum of 64 characters. So if the description cannot exceed 64 characters, and you can actually have special characters, but it is not recommended to have special characters. And regarding the queue manager name, your queue manager name cannot be more than 48 characters, and only period and underscore are the special characters which are allowed in the queue manager name. But you can use numbers and characters, so it is better to avoid any special characters. And I just missed to mention a major thing, because all the objects in WebSphere MQ are case sensitive. If you see, I have created a component as Mars, everything in small characters. So if I try to create another queue manager with the same cases Mars, it will not get created. It will say me already exists, the queue manager already exists. But if I use create an M as capitals, it will create me a new queue manager. So all the objects over here are case sensitive. So both these queue managers are not the same. These two are different queue managers. Okay. So I'll start this using GUI. So okay, here you have three choices to start. I'll explain what it is. Okay. So now in the previous tutorial we installed MQ, and it is running as a service in this Windows server. So let me show you that. So if you go to services, let me see, go to IBM, you can see this process is actually running every time. Okay, so if you create a queue manager object in service mode, and I have logged in as a administrator to this particular system, and even in if I log off, this queue manager will be running even if I log off as an administrator user. But if I had used Start Interactive, and I was the one who started the queue manager using the administrator login, and if the administrator logs out, then the queue manager will also be stopped. So it is always better to have it as a service, or you can actually use the automatic option which I will be showing you while creating the queue manager. And about the multi-instance, I'll be covering it in the subsequent topics. Okay. So start as created. So you can actually define it if it is going to be a service or automatic when you create the queue manager itself. So it will just take that property. So I'll show you shortly. Okay. Now let me start it as a service. Okay. So it's up. So I was telling you about defining it while creating the queue manager. So SA stands for starting the queue manager as a service automatically. So I will create another Neptune. Okay. So what is this automatic does? Okay. Now I have this process running. Now let me start this queue manager as well. So today's topic is more like an administrator perspective, because administrators create and manage the queue managers. So I don't think development people will be benefited by this, but it is really useful to know about this. So now what I'll do is I'll stop this MQ service which I have installed in the server. So what happens is all the queue manager object gets down. Okay. So now when I start this service, you can see only the queue manager named Neptune. Okay, Venus. What did I use for Venus? Okay. Well, I created Venus using GUI, and then this GUI I created it as automatic, I guess. Yeah, that's why it is also up and running. So as I created the service as automatic, and when I stopped the service and I restarted the service, no other queue manager was up and running, but these two were up and running because I created it as an service as automatic. So that was the reason. Okay. So similarly, if you want to create a queue manager as to be using an interactive service, you should use SI and SS for a manual service. So these are the different types that you can have your you can have the service for your queue manager object. Okay. So now we have seen about queue manager creation. So next we will see about how to stop a queue manager. So to stop a queue manager, the command used is endmqm. Okay. So you can the next parameter that you need to specify is -c, or even if you don't have -c, the default would be -c, because -c stands for controlled shutdown kind of thing, and you need to give the queue manager name. Here we can use the Venus one. Press enter. You can see squeeze request accepted, and what happens is, if suppose in a business scenario there are some transaction happening and you don't want to stop the queue manager abruptly, so you need to use this controlled shutdown kind of thing, so that all the transaction gets completed before the queue manager is stopped. So it is a best practice that you use always controlled shutdown. Okay. And there is another way to stop your queue manager as well, and that is endmqn-i, which stands for immediate, and you can provide the queue manager name. Okay. What happens is, even if there is any active transaction, that transaction get cancelled and the queue manager shuts down. So it is not always advised to use this option unless and until there is some kind of problem that you need to have your queue manager immediately stopped. Okay. So it has stopped immediately. Now if I use DSP-MQ, I can see that the status, and if you see Venus, which we used Control C, was it shows the status has ended normally, and we have used a control shutdown. And if we see it for the other thing, Neptune and other things, it shows it it shut down immediately. Okay, so you can see the status. Okay. And another one thing which I forgot to cover is, so all these queue managers are created in your local system. Okay. So you can have a default queue manager as well, default queue manager in which all the commands can be applicable. So to define your queue manager as a default queue manager, you need to have, it's really slow, just bear with me, -q, and you can give a name called sun. Okay. Okay. So now this particular queue manager will be created. So DSP MQ. Okay, but it's not started. Okay. Now if you see my previous examples, for the start queue manager I could have used strmqm space the queue manager name. But if I don't specify anything I mean the queue manager object name for this, it will start the default queue manager. In this case, it would be the sun. You can see that it has started the queue manager sun. So that is what is called as creating a queue manager as default. Okay, the parameter that you should be using is -q. Okay, so now we have seen about starting a queue manager, creating a queue manager, and also stopping a queue manager, and for displaying the queue manager, DSPMQ. So suppose DSPMQ, if you want to see only the active queue managers and not the ones which are in stop state, the command that you need to use is DSP-A, which lists down only the queue manager which is running. If you see, all the other queue managers might be stopped. Okay. So it gives you the active queue manager thing. Or if you want to see the queue manager of one particular queue manager, you can use DSPMQ -m and score the name in Neptune. Okay, so it provides the status of that particular queue manager. Okay, so the final step would be deleting a queue manager, for which the command would be dltmqm space the queue manager name. So we can provide it as Mars. So if you provide DSPMQ, you will not see the queue manager. I mean Mars, this is the one with the capital M, not with the small m, because we deleted the queue manager with the small m. Okay, so that's all about the queue manager object that we have in MQ. So this is a more about an administrative thing that is useful for an MQ administrator, and I guess I have covered everything with respect to managing a queue manager. But if you have any queries or any other issues to be addressed, you can just comment in the video below. And thank you everyone for watching this video. So I'll catch up in my next video. Happy learning. Bye.